Is WWE WrestleMania 18 worth buying, worth playing on the Nintendo Gamecube today? You're about to find out. What's up, everybody? This is Fred Richani of TSC Gaming, your home for game reviews, news, retro lookbacks, and everything in between. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. I am here to give you guys my thoughts on WWE WrestleMania 18, aka WrestleMania X8, the very first wrestling game, at least from WWE, on the Nintendo GameCube back in June 2002. I've been catching up on a lot of these GameCube classics, some obscure, some major, and as a wrestling fan, I said, hey, I gotta do a deep dive on some of these wrestling games. Now, Day of Reckoning and Day of Reckoning 2, and even WrestleMania 19 were relatively well received from the GameCube community, but I kind of forgot about WrestleMania X8. I got my hands on this one. I was excited because, keep in mind, WrestleMania X8 is the spiritual successor to No Mercy on the N64. You may recall it was Nintendo coming out with the N64, and then a few years later coming out with the GameCube. So this was the first Nintendo WWE game since No Mercy, the greatest wrestling game of all time for its storylines, game modes, etc. Finally, we get the WWE's debut on the GameCube, and what do you get? Not much. You get an exhibition mode, which has a number of match modes like TLC, Hardcore, Hell in a Cell, Cage Match, Fatal 4-Way, the usual you'd expect even back then. Path of Champion, where you could go for all the male belts, none of the female belts. You have Battle for the Belts, where you compete against user-created championships. You have the always fun Create a Superstar mode, and of course, you have your options. But here's what you don't have in WrestleMania X8. A rather large roster. You get the likes of Albert, Rikishi, Scotty Hotty, Landstorm Test, RVD, William Regal, Christian, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Steve Austin, Booker T. By the way, Steve Austin, right before he walked out of WWE at the time, Edge, Ric Flair, The Undertaker, The American Badass, Kane, Kurt Angle, Farouk and Bradshaw, the APA, The Dudleys, The Hardys, Hollywood Hogan, The Rock, Triple H, Chris Jericho, Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon, Rhino, Raven, He Who Must Not Be Named, Chris Benoit, The Big Show, Tajiri, and Taz. On the women's side, at the time, the Divas, you had Lita, Stephanie, Trish, Stacy Keibler, Molly Holly, and Jacqueline. And the wacky thing here is, and in a lot of these early WWE games from the 2000s, is that you can actually do men versus women. Seemed a little awkward, and is a little awkward looking back now, about 20 years later or so. But the real awkward thing about WWE WrestleMania X8 is, well, one, even though it's titled WWE, I believe this was actually the final wrestling video game from WWE to feature WWF, as in the old scratch logo. You may recall back in 2002, they lost the lawsuit against the World Wildlife Fund. It's a long story. Google it. So they changed their name to WWE, which is what they're known as today. But throughout the game, it's all WWF, which I'm assuming that means it was way too late to change the logos. That's fine. That's a cool little piece of history. What's not cool is the complete lack of a story mode, of voiceovers, of interesting angles, of unique scenarios that we'd come to expect with the Day of Reckoning series, with WrestleMania 19, and of course with SmackDown vs. Raw, and nowadays with WWE 2K, although the most recent WWE 2K was hot garbage, but that's another story for another day. The other thing, the character models. I know this is GameCube and we're judging roughly 20 years later, but I gotta say, Day of Reckoning 2, WrestleMania 19, those games looked a lot better than this. They moved a lot better than this. The one thing that's plagued WWE games over the last few years, actually the last 2 decades or so, has always been the multi-person matches, and it's no different here. It's very chaotic. It's all over the place. As for what's good, well, it's a nice trip down memory lane. If you're a longtime WWE fan or a wrestling fan like myself, you'll get a kick out of this. If you're a youngin', if you're somebody that kind of grew up on John Cena and Batista and Randy Orton, you might be thinking, oh my God, you boomers had to play this back in the day? Hey, don't judge us by this. Please judge us by No Mercy and WCW NWO Revenge. Other than a nice trip down memory lane, unless you're a collector, I don't see a reason for anybody to really pick up this game. If you already own this game and you want to just go back and play it with some friends, I mean, be my guest. I know the GameCube still has a huge fan base, a huge community, but in terms of any kind of real quality here, like, it's fun, you know, it's okay, but once the novelty of this being an older game with an older roster and the animations and Titantron and to see how far we come, once that whole nostalgia kind of fades away, it just kind of comes off like an updated version of WCW Nitro or WCW Thunder. And if you haven't played those games before, they were kind of cool for 97, 98. Not so cool after the releases of NWO Revenge and No Mercy because of the fact that, well, they didn't really have much of a story. It was just pretty bare bones. So again, if you're a collector, hey, go for it. As for anybody that's just looking to buy an old WWE game, wants to play it on the GameCube that you still have, right now on eBay, it's going for anywhere between like 13 to 20 bucks, which isn't bad at all. If you want to pick it up used for like 10 to 20 bucks, it's not bad. Anything more than that, unless you're a collector, yeah, I don't know if I could justify that. But if you enjoyed this retro review and nice trip down memory lane, let me know. Leave a comment below. Please like, share. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more reviews like this. And until next time, as always, enjoy the games.
1, 2, 3, pinball.